If you've listened to the music of Buena Vista Social Club or you've seen the movie, the documentary film, then you've heard the unforgettable voice of Omara Portuando. At 90, Cuba's legendary diva has been a driving force in Afro-Cuban music for over a half a century. In this first of its kind look at the life of one of the nation's biggest stars and last grand dames, director Hugo Perez brings audiences along for an intimate journey into the heart of Cuba's Bride of Feeling, following Omara as she celebrates and shares the music of her beloved island with the world. Terrific documentary film. We're joined today by the director of Omara, Cuba's legendary diva, Hugo Perez. Hugo, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here.
As I alluded to in the introduction, a lot of people are familiar with Buena Vista Social Club and Bender's terrific documentary, but brought to our attention so many of these legendary musicians. My understanding is your connection to Cuba, your connection to Omara goes back further and deeper. Let's talk a little bit about what brought you to the point where you embarked on this journey to tell the story of Omara Portuando.
Well, I guess a little backstory on me is that my family is from Cuba. They all emigrated to the U.S. after, or at least most of my mom's side of the family emigrated to the U.S. after the Cuban Revolution. My mom and dad came to the U.S. in 1965. I was born here and started to go to Cuba in 1996. Cuba was in the middle of what they call the special period, which was the most difficult economic crisis the island had had pretty much in its history, basically up until now, where it's an even deeper crisis these days. Yeah, and I guess so I started to do work on some little projects and write about stuff in Cuba. Yeah, like around 2009 or 10, I was involved with a PBS potential PBS project. It was going to be a concert special filmed at the Cathedral Plaza in Old Havana, and Omara was going to be the headliner, and it was going to be a selection of some of the greatest musical acts in Cuba at the time. I mean, like these things do, it kind of went into turnaround and never wound up happening. But because of that project, I had met Omara and her son Ariel, and we maintained kind of a little bit of like a friendship with them over the years. And then in 2018, I did an interview with Omara for another project about Cuban baseball. Her dad was one of the great Cuban baseball players of that era and also was one of the great players in the U.S. Negro Leagues at the same time. And she had to like get out the door to go to Poland and do a concert. But her son Ariel and I sat in her kitchen having an espresso. And then he just asked me, he said, "Hey, like, would you be interested in making a film about my mom?" And it was very informal. Usually like with figures like that, you have to spend years trying to get access. And in this case, it was just like, "What do you think?" And I didn't say yes right away just because I like to think about things, but I thought about it overnight. And I thought about if you'd had the chance to do a film with Billie Holiday or Ella Fitzgerald at the end of their lives. And I was like, this is a unique opportunity to capture an artist in the twilight of their career. And which I think there's something, Omara doesn't have necessarily the power in her voice she once did, but it's kind of made up for by something that's like there's a deeper feeling when she sings. And so I thought that it was interesting, somebody who's about to turn 90 who's still touring and to make a portrait of that. And what does that look like? So then I called him up the next morning and said, "Yeah, let's do it."
Yeah, there is something about a performer as they age. They do bring in other ways in which to do what they do so well. And I've always been intrigued by the ability of singers to become, I don't know, actor is exactly the right word, but infuse their performance with another level of kind of an emotional cadence, emotional pull to it all. And that's what I think you're describing in her performances.
When she sings, she's telling you about all of the experiences she's had in her life that relate to those songs
Right.
without telling you about them. And one thing that I think is very special about Omada is her phrasing. That's I guess the technical term. It's like Sinatra had great phrasing, right? Like the way that he would slide the lyrics back and forth within the time of the song. And Omada, she's just a master of making a song fresh every time.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard her sing some songs, 20 times over, and she never performed a song the same way twice. And it was pretty amazing, just to get to see how she would slide the lyrics into the rest of the music. And then how like, she seemed to like pull a feeling out of her. And she was like a vessel or like, that allowed this feeling to come out.
Well, again, I mentioned the Buena Vista Social Club and how important that was for a lot of people to get to know something about this kind of music, and particularly in her. And all of them were so striking. All of the performers in that film had personality. They had a certain point of view, perspective. They brought a lot of musical gravitas to what they did. Let's talk about her upbringing, where she started from, and how unusual it was for someone who's coming from where she did to achieve this level of notoriety and of fame.
She had a very unique upbringing because her dad was one of the great black ball players of that era in Cuba and in the US. But at that time, society was very segregated. And so even though he was like a top baseball player and baseball was desegregated, society was not. And so Omara's grandmother worked as a maid in the house of a very wealthy white family. The daughter of this family met the maid's son, that was Bartolo, and they fell in love and got married. And the mother was disinherited, was totally cut off from her family, wanted nothing to do with her because she had married a black man. And then the mother, this very white lady, moved into a very black neighborhood with her husband. And then they proceeded to have several children together, including Omara. That's where that's how she grew up in as the child of an interracial marriage at a time when interracial marriages were could result in your death. Like her mom and dad, sometimes couldn't even walk in public together in certain neighborhoods because they would be harassed. But the father loved music. He was a baseball player, but he loved music. And from a very early age, they would sing songs together. And then by the time she was like a teenager, her and her sister, I guess they were good enough that they started to get the attention of some of the local bands. They started to play with different small orchestras. Eventually, by the 50s, they were invited to join an all-female quartet, Cuarteto de Aida, which was like the Destiny's Child of 1950s Cuba. It's all these amazing female vocalists who, in their own right, most of them became kind of stars later, including Omara. But for a period of time, from like the mid 50s until about 1960, they became one of the top bands in Cuba. They were on the radio, they were on the TV, they were playing all the top cabarets. And the way things worked back then is that people really work. Like, I mean, you didn't just do one gig in a night. Sometimes you did three in three different places. You'd start off playing in a set in one casino, then go over to like another to a cabaret, and then wind up at like the Tropicana. Just crazy if you can imagine these. She would have been in her 20s at the time. It's just this crazy life. Finish a show and like get in a cab, go to another venue. And then she started her solo career just as the revolution happened. And she decided not to leave Cuba as many other people did, including her sister. Had success as a solo artist in Cuba, in many parts of the world, but not in the US because of the Iron Curtain of the Caribbean that separated Cuba from the US. For many decades, she was touring Europe, Asia, Latin America. She became fairly well known. So it was unlike some of the other people in the Buena Vista Social Club that had fallen out of any kind of like celebrity or had been retired, like Ruben Gonzalez and Ibrahim Ferrer. They had not been involved in music for decades, prior to Buena Vista, but Omada was still like a working artist, but just kind of touring, recording, but still kind of, hustling to make ends meet. I mean, in the 90s, when things got rough in Cuba, she was doing 3 or 4 shows a day. She'd do like an afternoon show, an evening show, late night show. But, everybody in Cuba knew who she was, and she had fans in other places. And she was recording, like a pickup for some album of hers at the Graham Studios when she heard that upstairs some of her old friends were recording this album with these crazy, foreigners, Ry Cooder and Nick Gold. She went up to say hi, and as these guys usually do, like when they see each other, they burst into song. And I guess, she and Ibrahim, I guess they did Silencio. They just sang it, and then Nick was in the booth. He's like, "Wait a second, we gotta." Anyway, it's
Yeah,
this is I think the story goes a few different ways, but I think this
yeah,
is the version I like to tell. Yeah, and so then that was, but
yeah.
interestingly, they did these sessions. None of these singers or musicians, they just got paid to come in. They did these sessions. Nick Gold and Ry Cooder went off and produced the album, released it, and Omara had no idea what had happened with these recordings until she was at this music festival in Colombia, and a reporter asked her, like, "How do you feel winning like a Grammy?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "Oh, that thing I recorded with those guys like a year ago." Like, that's how some of the other guys in the band had a similar. Barbarito, the guy that plays the oud, he was playing in a small band in Old Havana, and a tourist one day said to him, like, "Hey, like, I love your album. Buena Vista Social Club." He's like, "What are you talking about?" And then the guy brought a CD the next day, like I'll bring it to you. And he brought it. And it's like, "Oh yeah, like, yeah, this is the thing we did with these guys, Nick and Rye." And so it's just interesting how until it became a phenomenon, nobody expected it to become a phenomenon. It was just another gig. And then, of course, it did become a phenomenon. They toured the world, for like 20 years. From 1998 to 2016, the band was officially retired. The official Buena Vista Social Club. It was Omara, Eliades Ochoa, Barbarito, maybe a couple of the other guys. But, Ibrahim and Kumpai had passed away years earlier, and they just thought, like, we don't want to really keep on taking the band out on the road. And then Amada then once more went back to her solo career.
That, Hugo, that is a great story, an amazing journey. So heartening to see good things happen to good people, and especially in a business that is so cavalierly cruel to the people in it. It is, and that's all part of, by the way, that's all part of Cuba's legendary Diva, the telling of some version of what we just heard to the world for everyone to check this out. I do want to let people know that it will be premiering on
Voces.
Voices.
It's part of the Voces strand on PBS, which highlights Latino and Latin American stories.
Just a fantastic opportunity to really be introduced to a legendary, as you were mentioning, in the realm of a Billie Holiday or Ella Fitzgerald or that kind of talent who has had a tremendous impact on so many other artists, but also worldwide. There's a segment of the film about Japan and the people who are so drawn to the music all over the world. But it's just such a mind-boggling thing to see how music impacts people that you may not initially think would be impacted by.
We went and filmed with her in Tokyo where she was doing a couple of shows. She had been performing. This was like that year was the 50th anniversary of the first time that she performed in Tokyo, like in 1968. And the Japanese really, loved Latin music, and they loved her. And it was very special. I wish we'd had the funding where we could have traveled to some of the other places she went. She was a year later on another tour. She was in South Korea and Seoul performing for 15,000 people. I wish I could have gone with her to Brazil, where she was performing, like for 10 or 15,000 people. We had to kind of pick and choose, and Tokyo was the one. I mean, we did New York, Havana, Mexico City. Those are not that hard for us to do. And then Tokyo was the one like that where we were like, okay, if we're gonna do one that's far away, it's got to be Japan.
She is still with us. I'm happy to report that she is still among us, even though she is now 94, soon to be 95. Her birthday is coming up fairly soon, and she has a not only is her talent as a singer and musician, but her spirit, the people that she's inspired. You see that in the film. How many people adore her? Not only, I mean, for all the reasons that we've been talking about, and she has I don't know the word. I hate using a word like sassy, but she has a certain attitude over her work, over the performance, and that you can feel that in what you see in this film.
There's a word in Spanish. It's called chispa. It means spark.
There you
Uh,
go.
Omara has a lot of chispa. She's very sparky. Yeah, that's one of the things that she uses in some ways to obscure her personal life and to distract people and to entertain people. Like I mean, she doesn't like to talk about the past. She doesn't want to get bogged down in conversations, and she likes to have fun and be playful. And so she uses that like chispa to kind of drive the conversation to like funny things and away from revealing too much about herself.
Yeah,
Um,
that is her business. We have enough of her
yeah.
in the work and in her inspiration that she has been such a part of for other musicians and people, and just in general. I think her spirit just you can tell. It's the music, it's her performance, but it's just kind of her bearing that she brings to the people in her world and to this film, Omara, Cuba's legendary diva. And my congratulations on the film. It's one of the things I love about doing this show, I love about documentary films, is that they take you to places that you would have otherwise never been aware of. I want to, yeah, thank you so much for this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for spreading the word. Hopefully, everybody will tune in
Yeah,
on September 26th, 10 p.m. To watch the documentary. And I should note that there's going to be a streaming window for a while where people can watch the film on the PBS app on their phone, their laptop, their TV. So if people miss it, if they're out on Friday night and they want to watch it on Saturday, they can do that. And I also want to give a little tip of the hat to the Buena Vista Social Club Broadway musical,
thank
which
you.
is currently on Broadway, which is a fictionalized version of the story of how the album came to be recorded, with a large emphasis on Omada, fictional Omada as a character. So it's kind of loosely based on real events, but most of it is it's like it's a fictional version of what might have happened. They won 5 Tonys. They put together, I think, the best band on Broadway. If
Oh,
you really
good.
love this music, it's a great place to see it perform live.
Oh, I bet.
And they honored Omara's legacy in the show.
That's great. Great to hear. Again, as you were saying, on Broadway, and there's a touring company, I'm sure, or is there a touring company?
There's a touring company that's going to start in Buffalo next year sometime.
Okay.
They've already got something like the first year and a half of the tour booked. People across the country will get a chance to see that sometime next year, and I know that they've already booked a bunch of cities, so people should stay tuned for announcements in their areas.
Yeah. But if you're in New York and you're going to Broadway, this is certainly something to check out. So
Yeah, watch the documentary and then go to Broadway and and see the show, and you'll have a nice double bill.
there you go. Well, Hugo Perez, thank you so very much. Again, thank you for the film Omara, Cuba's legendary diva. Again, streaming beginning on September 26th on Voces. It will be streaming on Friday, September 26th. Check your local listings, PBS app as well, pbs.org. There's a number of ways that you can find out how to watch it, where to watch it, and I certainly hope that you do. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.